Just want to make sure that we're already on silent beforehand. Hey everyone, welcome back to Be Not Afraid. It has been about a week and a half, and the reason why is because it's been very hard, at least on my heart, and I'm sure on my co-host hearts as well. The things that have been going on, and they're direct link to the work that we've been doing with ethnic studies. I brought on my friend and fellow YouTuber, Deb Philman, to speak specifically about what's going on in Israel from a Jewish perspective. And from a human perspective, it's just really, really hard to watch our children being taught to hate and knowing that people are actively doing that to our kids. So welcome everyone.
Thank
And yeah, let's start, if you don't mind, with one of those videos on that just show exactly what we're talking about. Get this in checked.
Is Deb going to do it? Who's going to show that video?
We're gonna have Deb. Do you have it? Can you share it?
I do. Okay, let
Okay.
me grab it. I'm going to make sure that the sound shares for you. All right.
Okay.
Let's see which screen I can get it on. I don't know why it's not showing.
Let me see. You said it's in the. You shared it in the chat, right?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Let me.
Because for
see
some
if I-
reason the proper screen isn't showing up when I do this. Let me try something else. Yep.
Can you guys see?
I got
mine?
it now.
Oh no.
I got it
Oh,
now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
Are
Is
you
it
able
sure
to
it's
see it?
Hamas?
Yep.
Yep. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Value of killing Jews. This kid says, yes, they teach us that the Zionists are our enemy. This is a kid at a UNRWA school, a school run by the UN. This is in East Jerusalem. And we must fight them. They teach us that Jews are terrorists. At school, they teach us about Jews. They teach us that they are bad people. They killed our young. They teach us in school that Jews are fickle, bad people. I am ready to stab a Jew and drive a car over them. I will fight. These kids are like 7, 8, 9 years old. I will ram a car into them, the Jews. This kid's maybe 13. We have to constantly stab them, drive over them and shoot them, the Jews. Stabbing and running over Jews brings dignity to the Palestinians. This kid's maybe 12, 13. I'm gonna run over them and stab them with knives. Again, this is in East Jerusalem.
We can pause there.
Okay, so
So yeah, that's not very easy to watch. I think it's really important that people see the thread between the work that we're doing and why today we're watching this, the people across the ocean. And tomorrow it might be us. And also just the division that this is sowing. These are children, and they're being taught this in the exact same way that our ethnic studies curriculum has taught them to find the reasons why they're oppressed and to dismantle the systems. There's also so much footage of people in colleges who are supporting violence. And where I come from a place of, I come from a pro-human place. I think the human stops when we see the butcher of children. When we see children, I don't care what group they are in. When we see children being beheaded, I think we have went too far in a certain direction. So Deb, can you just start with
Why, how? Is that what you
Yeah.
kind of want to know? Okay. So speaking of ethnic studies, since that's kind of our topic, and whether you call it ethnic studies, whether you call it culturally relevant education, whether you call it African American studies, it kind of doesn't matter. When you have a program in the school that by definition separates kids into identities based on immutable characteristics of things like race or religion in particular, or even just ethnic culture, you are creating arbitrary divisions that the kids are now going to align with. They're going to try to identify where they fit and don't fit, what they believe and don't believe according to those characteristics. And that is a function of two things. One, it's a natural developmental process of children to figure out where they fit. They are in the process of defining their identity. Now, ideally, to be psychologically healthy, you define that based on character and internal drivers and agency, not based on the world around you necessarily. You don't want, most of us don't want to tell our kids, now it's very important what other people think of you. It just goes against what most parents that are decent parents would do. So they should have an internal locus of control and not care about things no one had a say in. Accidents of birth, like the color of your skin or even your religion, which you might be able to choose when you're an adult. But even that, we don't teach our kids to hate people of different religions. We might just say, we believe differently. I have different views than you do. And we live in America. And that's one of the great things about America is that we can. So when they engage in ethnic studies teaching, they are saying these dividing things, these immutable characteristics matter. They not only matter, they are the most important thing about you. They are how you will be judged. They are how you should judge yourself. They are what you should expect from other people, what you should expect from yourself, what will be expected of you. We've just, instead of breaking down barriers as far as expectations and stereotypes and so forth, we're actually just creating a new set for these kids. So for example, if you're Black in America and you go through an African American studies program or an ethnic studies program, you're going to pretty quickly figure out that there are certain political views you're supposed to hold in order to be properly Black, right? And the same thing holds if you are, Mexican, let's say, or Hispanic, or, whatever you are, there's going to be a not so subtle subtext. And that is based on the lens, the critical theory lens that is really being used in all of these programs. And that is to divide the world into groups of oppressors and oppressed. Ethnic studies makes that more granular. It says, these are the oppressed and these are the oppressors. They give them different names, colonizers and the colonized, but it's the same concept. And so what we've seen in the last week is we have seen that somebody on Twitter commented on it and she thought it was great. So it was really telling. She said, this is what decolonization looks like. What did you think it looked like? Did you think it looked like essays and letters and so on? And that's what my message to parents is, when you have ethnic studies in your school, they're teaching about the oppressed and oppressor narrative. They're teaching the colonizer colonized narrative, the settler colonial narrative. They're teaching things that are, first of all, opinions, not backed up by fact. In fact, there's quite a lot of fact that refutes this narrative, but your kids don't know that, and your kids don't know to challenge it. So the teacher says it must be true. Mom said, go to school and listen to the teacher. And not only does it work because they listen to the teacher and have no other challenging viewpoint, but it works because it feeds certain emotions, which are very prominent in young, especially adolescents, let's say, but also in children. And children are not known for being rational thinkers. They tend to be driven by their emotions. And so when you can feed the emotions of envy, and you can feed things like unearned shame and guilt, which a lot of kids take on, especially girls, unfortunately, hate to sound sexist, but that's the thing. Girls like to be agreeable. And when you can feed aggression that has nowhere to go, because now we don't have as much recess, we don't push kids to run around outside as much. So the male side of the energy doesn't have a lot of places to go with its aggression. So teaching kids this oppressor oppressed narrative, when a kid finds where they are on that chart, they're going to be tapping into a variety of emotions, none of which is positive or healthy. These do not advance the individual goals of your child, and certainly not your goals as a parent to have your child be happy, healthy, well-adjusted. So it's just plain toxic. And of course, worst case, you end up with college students marching on a campus, as we saw at University of Pennsylvania this week, chanting for Jewish genocide explicitly.
Right. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out too, that I heard you say, was that this is global.
Yes.
And it is. It's going. I was watching yesterday on Peter Boghossian talking about this happening in India and this happening in Israel, and obviously it's happening in all of Western society. It's also happening in Africa. It's everywhere.
What is so tragic is how many people probably died who were at a peace concert. And if I had to guess, and please, I beg of you, do not hear me saying that they deserve, nobody deserves what happened to them. But I would bet that they were absolutely shocked, like more shocked than anybody, what was happening to them, because my guess is that they were educated in much the same way. I know for a fact there's a couple right now in captivity in Gaza who had dedicated their senior years to picking up Gazans at the border and driving them to Israeli hospitals for treatment. It was a Jewish couple that had dedicated themselves to those kinds of peaceful actions of togetherness and neighborliness and so forth with their Palestinian neighbors. And so there were probably quite a few people at that peace concert, just listening to music, loving each other, wanting to hang out with each other, who mean nobody any harm at all, and probably are amongst the students who've come out of programs that are like, you know what, let's just give them back the Kotel. The Kotel, for those who don't know, is the Western Wall. Why do we need it? It's just a bunch of rock. I mean,
right.
This is very common even in the United States amongst Jewish students. They tend to be fairly let's make peace. Now they may have changed their mind in the last week. But what you see amongst students who are not Jewish right now and who don't already know quite a lot about the history of the conflict and, have a more nuanced view, is you're seeing them take sides, even though they're not Arab. They've never set foot in the region. They don't have any relatives in the region. They really only know what they've been taught in ethnic studies class. And they take the side of what they perceive to be the underdog, which are the Gazans or the Palestinians. And I'm not here to tell anyone what sides to take. What I'm here to say is that action on the part of the students is knee-jerk. It's not thoughtful engagement. They haven't really, look how fast they showed up right after a massacre. The only way that the children of otherwise enlightened people would show up and be seeming to approve and referring to something as a legitimate resistance action is if they genuinely believed that that's what it was, that the people who were killed were oppressors, when they know they're all just innocent civilians. But when you see people as an oppressor, it changes your viewpoint on who deserves to live and not live. So it's really quite tragic that what would once have caused kids that age to be absolutely horrified, even if they didn't know both sides and they didn't want to pick sides and all that, they would be like, that's wrong. Like killing people who are not in in uniforms, that's just messed up. And there are obviously some kids doing that, but we're seeing an inordinate number who aren't. And I would lay that square at the feet of the teachers in the ethnic studies curriculum.
Brooke, I saw you writing a lot of notes down. You've got some thoughts.
I love listening to you, Deb. It's awesome. I just, whenever I listen to something, I think about why is this happening? How can we stop it? How can we help people believe it or understand it? And one of the things I wrote down is that the seed of hate is blindness or deceit, that they can't see what's really happening or who someone really is, because we're losing sight of the individual in front of us, and we're attributing it to groupthink, which is communism, and then the basis of our freedom is individual liberty. And so I believe that's the seed of hate, is groupthink, and you don't see people, you don't see individuals. And so how can we help people see this? So that was my first question. I would love because as Lynn said, empathy is what's driving this thing towards ethnic studies. People want to be empathetic. They want to love. And it's like, well, I would love it if I could show you that your desire to love is leading, it's the seed of hate, because you're labeling, you're using so many labels to shade and cover the individual so that you can't see them anymore, because your labels are just obstructing the truth of who that person is. And then you said something, an enlightened people, and you referred to like Americans as an enlightened people. And I want to challenge that sentence.
Well, I meant
phrase.
it like that's what we were supposed to be, right? I mean, our founders were certainly enlightened, very much of the Enlightenment. So when I say things like that, I'm talking about our lineage, our heritage, the legacy we're supposed to be passing to our children is one of enlightenment. That is the entire point, or allegedly was the point. I don't know that it really was, of the American education system, was to reproduce the culture that gave us those individual liberties, the Bill of Rights, and all the things we were supposed to hold dear. So if we're not doing that, you're absolutely right. We are no longer, we've strayed very far from the Enlightenment. But I said it because if you ask people, they'll say, well, yes, of course I'm enlightened, or I'm from an enlightened culture. I don't believe in barbarism or whatever. And like, your child is out there chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is literally, that's just a fancier way of saying shove all the Jews in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is not very enlightened sounding to me.
Well, I'm wondering about the idea of false enlightenment, because so many people think that they are smart, especially I got in a discussion with someone the other day about progressivism, and they were saying, oh, progressivism is just, we're just moving forward. And it tends to be the opposite of that. And that everybody believes that, oh, because I'm on the side of progress. And I've just been asking people, I said, you do know that your ideas of progress, your new and enlightened ideas, are the same ideas that Mao used, and that Stalin used, and that Hitler used. So all of these things that we're putting in front of our kids, and we're saying, oh, if you believe this, if you agree with this kind of thing, then you are enlightened. Now, something else that I saw, because I'm a regular follower of Deb's, she was talking about somebody who was talking about the new critical race theory. And they were saying that the original people to be in America are the Moors. So what we get with this, when we take our groups and we say that the original people are the ones who need to be here, they are the ones who need to be treated, they're the sovereign people, whatever. Okay, well, most people in America are going to say, well, then, so it goes back to the Native Americans. And like I said, the last time we were talking, they're now pulling kids out of history class so that they can have their own history. And I'm pretty darn sure that's going to lead towards land acknowledgements in my little tiny small town. But once they get that point where they're saying, we demand our land back,
right,
then the Black community is going to come in and say, oh no, we're the originals because we're from Moorish. And it never, ever ends.
Well, it's also kind of ridiculous. I mean, like you said, it never ends, but I would like to challenge the concept of progress. I think what we have going on right now in the world is that dueling definitions of progress, or at least dueling understandings of history. So there are those who believe that the history of humankind is always moving forward, progressing forward, that humans are just on an upward trajectory of getting smarter and better and building and so on. And it just always moves forward. Those are your progressives. They have to rewrite a lot of history and ignore a lot of things to believe that, but they do believe it. And then and there's a long tradition of people who believe that. And then you have those who think history is a lot more organic, has a tendency to go in cycles. They're not perfectly prescribed cycles, but that human beings, human. In other words, we have free will. We have the capacity to be incredibly good and the capacity to be incredibly awful. And that certainly modern history has shown us, the 20th century in particular, that when we lean too heavily on the progressive side of thinking that we can use science and technology and human ingenuity to make everything better, like to just sort of shape the environment and shape people and train people. And like, we can make utopia if we just work hard enough at it. And, those who are religious would say that that was the ultimate sin. You make yourself a god and bad things happen. Well, Mao tried it, didn't work. Stalin tried it, didn't work. Hitler tried it, didn't work. That is really what they all did. And I think what we have now is we have a similar thing of, you have people saying, if we can just teach everyone to have the right thoughts and the right attitudes about things, we can make the world better. And in fact, they're just leading us inexorably towards the same conclusion, which is that human's going to human, and human nature cannot be trained by these kind of things, and in fact will rebel. And when it does, it doesn't go the way you want. It's a very messy, chaotic process. And I believe what we're seeing right now in the Middle East is a symptom of that. You've got one side that is absolutely the nature of man. It's barbarism without any kind of real rational thought. And if you're only in the mystical and you only believe like superstition and hate and all the like most base emotions, you get Hamas. And then you have the people saying, well, just call a ceasefire and we'll all sit down and talk about it and everything will be fine. And you get the other people who genuinely believe that, and they're completely insane because they're not willing to see the reality in front of their face, which is that the natural state of man is much more complex. You can't just talk people out of those base instincts. They have to learn, they have to experience, they have to fall down and get back up again. And that's what our schools were for. And we're not doing that. We're quite literally at this point teaching our kids how to be Hamas. We're teaching them how to think in the same, ritualistic land acknowledgements, my feels, my truth, your truth, all this superstition, stereotyping. That is primitive. It's primitive. So in this twisted paradox, like, we'll tell people what to think and everything will be better. They're actually going backwards, not forward.
Right. Yeah. I look at it as savagery.
It is.
It's just
what it is.
The point that only the most evil people will sacrifice others. And we are teaching our kids that people are disposable.
People aren't people. In point of fact, is what we're teaching them.
Yes.
That some people are, like with Animal Farm, some animals are more equal than others. That if you listen to Hamas, they will tell you Jews aren't people. They describe, just like the Nazis. I know people don't like these comparisons, but it is apt. Yep. The reason the Nazis were able to do what they were able to do was an actual like lengthy, slow drip dehumanization of Jews, and not just Jews, right? First they come for the Saturday people, then they come for the Sunday people. So, they start there and they describe Jews as unclean. They compared Jews to dogs, pigs, vermin, etc. When you listen to Hamas, they do the exact same thing. There's no difference. They're using the same playbook. Now, the difference I see now between the Nazis and Hamas is, and this is going to sound very strange, the Nazis knew what they were doing was wrong, right? But they just wanted to do it anyway. That's why they hid it, covered it up, lied about it, sequestered the camps away in Eastern Europe, where, maybe people won't notice, oh, there were camps, Arbeit Macht Frei, right? They kind of knew, but they wanted to do it anyway. And they did it in a very mechanistic way to try to sanitize things. So it's still completely evil. Don't hear me wrong. Hamas derives joy and glory and absolute, like, you can see the ecstasy in their videos. And when they talk about killing, that is why I think it's savagery. So there's a kind of absolute brutality and man against man that you saw in the Nazis. And this is savagery. This goes back to 10th century Bronze era thinking of where I would bet if you did IQ tests on most of those people, we're talking maybe 80. If you're lucky, maybe they're 80. So these are not people capable of rational thought, period. And that's not to say they deserve to die. That's not what I'm saying. The perpetrators deserve to die. Their children don't. But what I'm saying is that you can't reason with them. You're not going to sit down and have a chat about, please don't do this anymore. Let's have peace. They don't want peace. They don't want to share land. They don't even want the land of Israel, guys. It's not about land. This is about reestablishing a caliphate. This is about bloodlust. The ethnic studies curriculum and the stuff in California in particular, I don't know how it is in Utah, has all this like Mayan, Aztec, stuff in there with human sacrifice. They're like, when you're going to elevate to cultural relevance, human sacrifice, chanting about sacrificing, groups of people who died out. I mean, like they lost to more civilized people who actually improved human thriving. And you're going to elevate that to the same level. What is the message the child gets? All values are equal. All ways of looking at humans are equal. And then if they establish an identity, so let's say they're Hispanic, Mexican, something. Let's say they decide that there's somehow more glory. I feel better about myself and whatever my circumstances are. If I feel like I'm descended from an Aztec warrior who sacrificed my enemies or sacrificed people who are weaker than me. Now I feel strong. Who knows what's going to go on in the mind of an adolescent? And I want to join together with others and chant and all this. What's to stop them from acting on that? So it starts as just a thought. Then it becomes a feeling. Then it becomes what? What is it? What happens next? Hamas didn't start off as Hamas either. So all these things start as ideas and then they take on lives of their own. And I would tell you that the people teaching and advocating for ethnic studies, not the ones who are lobbying for it, not the protesting people. They know perfectly well what it's for because they're Marxists, hardcore, and they'll tell you. I'm talking with the nice people in Sacramento and the nice people in Salt Lake City or wherever, and they're just like, this is important so we can all love each other better and just be like more inclusive. And, they think they're being so enlightened and loving and worldly, and they haven't sat back and said, hang on a second, would we want to go back and live in the Aztec world? Like, is their culture really legitimately equal to Western European culture? And why are we so embarrassed to say no? We never used to be embarrassed about that. We'd say, no, of course not. They sacrifice virgins. That's horrible. I'm so glad they don't do that anymore. Let's continue with our lesson. Instead, we're telling them like it's mean to say that modern man or European society is better or worse. How is that mean? I can put on pants and get a job and decide if I want to have babies or not. Good luck to someone in Gaza. The 18th article of the Hamas charter says women belong in the home and making babies. That's today, 2023. So, I mean,
kids don't know about it because
they don't know.
They're pawns. They're soldiers.
How dare you judge? We're told. It's like, I'm not daring. I think, how dare you not judge?
But they're judging their own people. They're judging half of American society. So that's why
right.
I consider them to be pawns or soldiers.
They are.
They do not know enough. They go where they're told to go. They march where they're told to march.
That's right.
And
they don't know what the logical end point is of this idea. If you ask them, if you said to them, you realize you're judging, half the population, or let's just keep it to Jews. Let's just keep it to Jews. And if you said to the student protesters, you do realize that there are about, let's see, in the United States, maybe 6 million Jews. And you're saying that you'd be perfectly okay if they were dead.
Right.
They died. They ceased to exist, that they are settler colonialists and therefore they don't have a right to live. Would you do it yourself? Like, I would want to say to a high school kid who's protesting, so if I gave you a knife, would you stab me? I'm a Jew. Would you kill me? And I want to watch them squirm. I really do. I want to put them on the spot and some, high school senior or something out there from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Okay, you're standing right now in Tel Aviv and I'm standing next to you in Tel Aviv. I'm a Jew and you are not. You want to help the Palestinians and you want to free Palestine. Are you going to stab me with a knife? Would you shoot me?
The thing is, Deb, is that yes, these kids will. And part of it, I wonder if it's not only are we dumbing them down, but we're also, the drugs. So like psychedelics, they make people
possibly
do things that I can't imagine that a sober person would walk in and behead a baby. I just can't imagine that would happen. But maybe
it's hard to say. I know that the Nazis used meth a lot. So did we. We didn't go mutilating people, but
but we're watching now on every level. So we have this attack from the schools with ethnic studies, but there's also an attack on faith. So I just recently attended
Yeah.
on accident a conference, and at the conference, every single person, there were multiple people there, right? So it was called Faith Matters, and there's all different faiths supposedly represented, but they all have one message. Faith is old-fashioned. Change your views. So
Well,
it's the
they just
same
want the
message.
kids to choose a different religion. This is a religion.
It is it's exactly a religion, but what they're saying though is it's the four olds. So they're getting it on every level. They're the exact same thing that they're getting from school, because when they go to school, they are absolutely going to be told first, it's not Jewish people in our schools. It's first the
right.
white male Christian, right? That's the first group that's supposed to be disposable. But once they're
Yes.
gone, it's the next group. And
right.
eventually when it becomes, can you imagine, you've got the woke, anything goes, gender, whatever, and the Islamic, and they're the only two groups left. That's going to be pretty.
Yeah, I don't think it would go quite that way. I mean, I think the more you feed the beast of Islamism, it grows faster than any other, is because it's already there. Meaning, you know, I know I'll get pushback for this, but I'm just going to say it. Islam never went through a reformation. Christianity went through a reformation. Judaism was never really, it didn't really have like an extremist sect or mindset. It was never okay to kill in the name of, God like that en masse. I'm not saying it was in Christianity. I'm saying there were some people who misinterpreted some stuff, but it went through a reformation. Christianity went through a reformation, and Islam has not. That is not to say there aren't moderate Muslims. Of course there are. There are some wonderful people out there who are speaking out and risking their lives right now to speak out against what Hamas is saying. And I am so grateful to them, but they are risking their lives. Like the official stance of, the mullahs in Iran and various, people in the madrasas in Saudi Arabia and other places where the imam are, it'll tell you that Sharia is the law. And under Sharia, it is okay to beat your wife. It's okay to kill your enemies. And I mean, they're, forcibly convert people. So these things are sanctioned. So when someone is simply fundamentalist in Islam, that's where you are with it, right? So that grows faster, in my opinion, than our ability to fight against it. It appeals to certain kinds of people, mostly young men, because it elevates them to primacy above women. We have a Western society that has feminized the living daylights out of everything, including men. So that gives young men who are Muslim or want to seem macho and might convert to being Muslim, whatever. You have these dueling things going on. The almost extreme of toxic masculinity, for lack of a better term, right? And then you have the men can be women. And this, because this is more closely aligned with human nature and reality and the history of the world than this manufactured, medicalized thing, this is going to grow faster than this. And especially when you are teaching hate in the schools, which is what they're doing. And they'll say, no, we're teaching love. I'm like, but you're not. That's not what love is. Love in many respects would be loving someone enough to leave them alone if you don't like them. Like if you say, I love my neighbor, I love my enemy, you don't kill your enemy. You just cut them a wide berth. I mean, so that live and let live is a little bit more loving than, I love you so much, I'm going to kill you. So you no longer, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Or I love you, so I'm going to hate you. Doesn't make sense. And hate is not the same as being indifferent. It's an active emotion. What do you get when you teach a child that somebody is oppressing someone else, that someone's existence oppressed or oppresses other people? If you're also teaching empathy, as you pointed out, how can you not be mad at the oppressor? How can you not hate them? Stop oppressing people. And then the poor kid who's white is going, well, I'm not oppressing anybody. Yes, you are. I was told many
Just by
times.
existing. And those are the words they use. Just by existing, you are causing harm. When they say words like that in the classroom,
yes,
how can they not see how is it possible that a teacher doesn't know that when another person says that to just by existing, what do they say? They say things to Candace Owens. How do you feel about just your very presence and being here is causing us harm?
That's right. Harm.
Mm-hmm. I've had
Right.
people
It's
say the same
harmful.
thing to me. Oh, you not completely supporting everything that we do and everything that we want to do makes you an evil person, makes you a transphobe, makes you whatever. And I'm like, I don't agree with that, because half of the reason I don't agree with the things that I don't agree with are because there's such things as the D-trans community.
Well, I
So,
think, oh,
yes.
sorry.
No, go ahead, go.
I think it's a matter of we have lost the ability to use the terms good versus evil. Because of moral relativism, we can't say this is good, this is evil.
That's right.
And so just a second, please.
It's
But
okay.
That's
Yeah, we're all moms. We have kids.
But sorry, they just got home from school, so I just had to tell them to wait a minute.
It's okay. It's all good.
Yeah.
So we've lost the ability to name good from evil, and instead we call people safe and unsafe. And the people who are safe are those who will not call people out, and the people who are unsafe, who are people who stand for something and who still recognize that there is good and evil in this world, and lies are evil. And when you call somebody and make somebody responsible for something they had no part in, that is a lie, that is deception, and therefore it is evil. So going back to your enlightenment thing, I thought you did a really good job of explaining it and expounding upon it. I just wanted to say that self-enlightenment, as you said, that it brings out the savagery. It's humanistic, and so we tend toward our baser selves. And so enlightenment implies that you have light, and what is the source of that light is of the utmost importance. Who's the source?
Yes,
And,
that is right. Yep.
And I think that's where people need to turn to their source of light. And for me, that's God. And you need to say, it's dark down here. We can't see what's good and evil anymore. People say this, you're evil if you're unsafe. You're evil if you stand for something.
Right.
So I can't see what's true anymore. And I really think there needs to be a big turn to the source of true light. And people need to seek for that and stop relying upon what's most accessible or available, or the propaganda that's there, or what's most widely accepted, especially teachers. Now, of course, I would like to say, hey, don't teach oppressed or oppressed and everything. But I would like to aspire to, but who am I? And I would like to aspire to their true source of light and say, please go to the source of light that you have found yields the fruits of light, right? What are the fruits of light? It's not cutting babies' heads off. It's not blowing people up.
Here's the problem. Yeah, but here's the problem. And we really do have to have a conversation about this, because there are woke churches and there are woke pastors, and there are people who are actually bastardizing the scripture and all that in the gospel and the Old Testament as well to fit to this narrative. And here's the thing we need to understand historically, is that the same ideas that are underneath these, woke ideas, the postmodernists, are of the Enlightenment. So in other words, the Enlightenment era gave birth to our founders and all kinds of wonderful things, and science and, reformations of religion and stuff like that. But you had people who were ironically rather upset that this new push towards humanism and science and things might do away with mysticism and belief in God. And they began looking for ways to show that reality could not really be known. So in other words, most religious people I know in the 21st century, even though they believe in God, will say, yes, but reality can be known. So I can't necessarily see God, touch God, have a conversation literally and videotape it with God. I mean, I can have a private relationship and so forth, but I can't prove it to, an audience that this exists, but I can know reality. I can, touch this, feel this, these are a pair of glasses. Okay. And so in an effort to sort of elevate the unknown and the unseen and so forth, they started talking about, reality can't really be known. You have people like Kant, you have people like, you have sort of a nihilism. They came about after they started poking around with the idea of what do you really know? Your existence is really just your perception after all. You don't really know anything except what your experiences tell you. And it's that thing, that hyper intellectual, we're going to move away from tangible objective reality and facts and knowledge and so forth in an effort to save the divine, that they actually brought Satan into being. I mean, if you're a religious person, that is basically Satan. When you sit there and say reality can't be known, you don't know anything, you're not even really alive, you're not really even here, that's just a perception that you have and so forth. That's the trick, that's the lie that knowledge, I believe, if you're looking at Genesis and you look at the Garden of Eden and you look at the free will that bit the apple, all right, and everything that happened after that, the one that says, and none of this is real and all of this is just so it doesn't really matter. And of course you can
become like God.
You can just be God. And then you have, at the turn of the century, a group of people who took this to the nth degree with the Theosophists. They got very up and involved in education and all kinds of weird Gnostic levels of spiritualism. And now you have, what they're basically telling our kids is that they have gnosis. They have special knowledge that only they have, that they're going to impart to the kids, and that it will make the kids be their own gods. This is like, some call it satanic, other people call it Gnostic, other people just call it completely insane, cluster B psychopathology, whatever you want to call it. It is the opposite of faith that is grounded in the, in enlightenment. In other words, faith that knows this is where I end and God begins, right? But I am still here. Like, I am a creation. I am part of the creation. I exist. I am made up of atoms and matter, and this is real. This is not imaginary. There is no my truth and other people's truth. There might be my perception and someone else's perception. But if it were videotaped, there would be a truth. Like, there is something called truth. There is something called good. There is something called evil. And even for those who don't necessarily ascribe that to, like, God tells me what is good or evil, we can still know it by its fruits.
Yes.
So even though I'm Jewish and I'm agnostic, I still can look at human flourishing, human life, human ways of treating other people, and I can say, this is of the good because I can see it. And this is evil because I can see it. It's clear, it's obvious. And to act in this manner is clearly bad. But when you tell people there is no reality, there is no truth, and you start at the age of 6, and there's just different ways of knowing, you guys. And physics is, we can't really trust even the laws of physics because they were written down by white guys. And I'm not exaggerating. They are doing these kinds of things. We have to bring equity into physics, and we have to challenge the ways of knowing. That still was born of a hyper intellectual frustration in the middle of the Enlightenment, where people said, we've got to somehow save God from science. And it kind of went off the rails into wacko land. And I'm not explaining it properly at all. James Lindsay does a much better job. But Immanuel Kant is the closest thing I can come to Satan, who showed up on planet Earth and said, I'm not going to allow you to use the gifts that God has endowed you with, the gift of reason, the gift of the gift of learning, the gift of being able, okay, you bit the apple, but there's different ways you could go with that. You can go in a good way, right? Or you can go in a really bad way. And I think this dude showed up and said, yeah, you don't have control over any of it. So now you have to pursue control over all of it.
But again, we're getting back to that falseness.
Yeah,
we're
it's
getting
so
back
false.
to the falseness of that.
So
they
false.
think they have control.
They
The
want
ultimate
control.
They think they have control, but that ultimate control comes from the people at the top level who are telling them. I was watching Bill Gates talk about how wonderful ethnic studies is.
He's insane. I will go on the record right here and right now and say the man is a megalomaniac.
Yes.
I think he's I think he's diagnosable. He's insane. When you listen to him long enough, you're like, you are not right in the head.
Well, and
Sure.
I'm watching him and the people for the World Economic Forum and finding out that the World Economic Forum came out of Harvard. I found this out yesterday, and that it came out of Harvard. So these people who are telling our kids, oh, you've got power, you find your own power within yourself, their
They're lying.
intent is to divide our kids and make them the useless class. That's literally what they say. It's what the whatever Harari or gentleman says, is that their goal is a useless class soothed by drugs and video games. And
Yep.
our children are becoming more and more useless. And it pisses me off, which I'm not a
Mhm.
big swearer, but it pisses me off that we're
Right.
my parents are getting emails regularly that say this is why SEL is so important. This is why ethnic studies is so important. Utah is about to bring in to do a thing on PBS about the wonders of ethnic studies.
The wonders.
And
Yeah.
I am the one person, literally, they said when they reached out to this group, they said it can be anyone but her. Why?
Really?
Literally anyone but her, because I cause cognitive dissonance. You can't look at somebody who grew up the way I did, grew up in the foster system, grew up with absolutely nothing, is not interested in
Yep.
being a victim, and is intelligent, and say, oh, we're doing this for you. So
That's right.
instead we shut you down. And the only reason I use that, not to be like, oh, look at me, but the reason that I'm using that is people see, you need to see that the goal of ethnic studies is not to lift anyone up.
No,
It's to lift up a narrative.
definitely not.
And if that
Definitely not.
narrative isn't used, if that narrative is not being worshipped, then they will squash you, and they will squash your children, and they will justify squashing the innocent.
Yep.
Just like Hamas. That's literally where we're at. Just like
Yep.
Hamas. People are disposable if they don't think the right way.
But it
So-
is, it is of the Enlightenment. Tragically, it is one of those things where somebody sat down and thought too much, and out came this garbage.
So what's the positive fruit of ethnic studies that they say, hey, when you study it, this is the people that you become? Where's their evidence that this is going to lead everyone to the nirvana that they're trying to supposedly
But see,
Right.
that's how you know it's a religion, because they have no compunction about telling you we don't have evidence and how dare you ask for it. This is the religious fundamentalist answer. So even faithful will tell you, well, here's my evidence for God. And they'll give you evidence. They'll tell you, you might not agree that it's evidence, but they'll at least respect the question. They'll respect the fact that you asked. They will disagree with you or need to have it, let's say, whatever. But you're not going to get people saying, I don't need to have it, see it, give it to you or anything. It just is because it is, right? Now, there are some people who will say that, but we don't necessarily engage with them. I've had many conversations with people of different faiths, and they will tell me what their version of evidence is. You ask somebody who teaches ethnic studies, where's the evidence that this produces the wonderful nirvana that you claim? And actually, half the time they don't claim it produces anything. They're not trying to produce anything other than revolution. This is to foment revolution. Revolution is its own end, and it's never ending. And it is the goal. Revolution is the goal. Destruction is the goal. Is that not Satan? Literally. As I understand Satan to be, again, as an agnostic person, it is just the bad for being the bad, the evil for being the evil, the destruction of all that is good for its own sake. That's what decolonization is. That is what ethnic studies is leading towards, because revolution, I think it was just, imagine a wheel spinning and spinning off into space. It doesn't end anywhere. It's not even trying to create utopia. Now, the people over in the WEF claim that they're trying to create a better world and utopia and so forth. But what they're doing is playing with fire. They think they're going to get to that better world with all these different purges. They think they can control the chaos. That's their hubris. That's what makes them so terrifying, is they're sitting atop all of this. They know perfectly well they're creating cannon fodder. Little revolution here, a little revolution there. We'll kill off 1 million people here. We'll kill off 1,000 people there. We'll kill however many we kill off. And when the dust settles, only the strongest, the best, the most productive, the most smart, whatever will be left. And we'll have fewer people to control like little sheep, and everything will be great. Because you see, they genuinely believe the Earth's resources are super limited because they live in a bubble. They're wrong, but they actually believe they are God.
But when you have, 26 mansions and billion
No,
cars and whatever else,
and when
need
you
more.
have that much power, here's a
Right.
little known psychological fact. I don't know what it's called, but when you get to a point of having like FU money, I mean, like we're talking the kind of
Right.
money where you can't live 5 lifetimes and never spend it enough. You don't want for anything. And nothing bad's going to happen to you because you don't have money. And in fact, you burp and people fall at your feet. Okay. Is a tremendous sense of insecurity. You don't know what life would be like without that. They cannot imagine living just like us. They
Right.
think that we are in such dire, so when they look at people worse off than we are, and they're terrified. These people would wall themselves. They build a mansion on top of a hill with walls and then more walls and security guards and some more security guards. They're absolutely terrified of anything resembling chaos or, mess, because they don't have mess in their lives. They spill something, someone's there to catch it on the way down. And those kind of people can't cope. They cannot cope. And they're turning our kids into people who can't cope for different reasons, but who are out there creating destruction and so forth because they think they can control that. It's very scary. It's very scary. And it's evil. It's pure evil.
I have one thought on the why your question, Brooke, and what I'm thinking about. Sorry, I hope you guys can't hear my dog freaking out because the mailman's here. But okay, when you watch a video on YouTube promoting ethnic studies, which we've all watched, they leave out essential pieces of what it's about. So you'll watch the cartoon one and it'll show, oh, our children need to see their history. We can all agree with that, but they know that they're lying because they leave out a big chunk. Oh, and by the way, we want our kids to be activists who dismantle the system. They leave it out every single time because they know what they're selling us is a scam. It's the same reason why if you go to Castle's website and you look at the parent page, it's so much different. There's none of the confess your guilt stuff that there is on the teacher page because they know 100% that they are lying and they are selling us a bag of poop. So
I think here's the thing though. When they tell us all this stuff about ethnic studies and how great it is, and they say kids need to see themselves in the history, I'm the person over here challenging that and saying, why?
Right.
First of all, how do you know? How do you know that? You ask them, you ask the kids, and they said, I can't learn history unless I see myself. Like what? We're all narcissists now. We all have to see ourselves in everything in order to appreciate it. I got news for you. I can go to the Louvre and I can look at the paintings and I can see nothing that looks like me, and I can still appreciate the art. I can go to Mexico and go to Chichen Itza and see nothing that looks like me or resembles anything I'm used to and still appreciate the art. I can learn about the history of, ancient pick a place, and I don't need to see anything that is about me. First of all, what is me in history? I'm here now. So again, they're using another way to connect you. Like, you are not a separate individual. You're just one strand in the long line of people who look like you, worship like you, have the whatever history of you. So they connect them to people that they never knew, who suffered things they're not suffering, and act like it's all one big organism. So the kid has no sense of individual self. They completely destroy the self, and then have you identify with that and then say, and you need to see that. So when you really solidify your attachment to these people that you never knew and never going to know and aren't living like, because that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is destroy the self, the healthy self, not the narcissistic self, the self that says, I have rights and I kind of like to defend them. Yeah, that's what America's about. How do we destroy America? We have to destroy the sense of self. Understand also that the idea of a self at all is new. In human history, the concept of a self that where you're aware that I am a unique individual living on planet Earth. One time I'm going to die. Whatever else is going to happen to me. This is it. Right. That is a very new, and all the human history that has been, it's like that fast, because we started off tribal for survival, and that went on really long. Okay, you were your tribe. You couldn't leave your tribe, or bad things would happen to you. You would either die of natural causes or you'd get punished. So you didn't break out of your tribe to do that, because this was how you survived. And the tribal structure of humankind still exists in some parts of the world today. That's how old it is. So what we had in the United States and even in Western Europe, of this notion of like, I'm going to sit and think my thoughts, and I'm going to put art on it, and it's going to be mine, and I'm going to create a family, and it's going to be my family, and I'm going to move halfway across the country from my family of origin, and no one's going to kill me for it, whatever. This is a new thing. And what they are doing is no less than dragging us with our children back to a more primitive version of humankind, where the self doesn't exist, where I can sacrifice myself, my friend, my child, my everybody, because we're all expendable, because none of us is unique. I don't have a right to life. It doesn't even exist. And that is why all those people put all their eggs in the basket of their, whatever their religions were, the idols that they worship and all this stuff, because their life here was short, brutal, and unpleasant. The Enlightenment gave us a way to extend our lives over, but also gave us a more enlightened faith. They're like, well, how did we get the capacity to do all this? Must have been a benevolent God. Must not have been a cruel God, a punishing God. Must have been more benevolent. Must have loved us. Must have been, right? So that's how we get the ability to even have Christianity. Try to introduce Christianity to people in the Bronze Age, well, not the Bronze Age, but way beyond, like before the wheel. Okay. And it might have been a harder sell.
Yeah.
Might have been a harder sell. I think he needed a wheel. I think he needed some science. I think he needed a few things. People go, where'd we get? I wonder how this is possible. Oh, someone loves you. A lot easier to believe than, I've had 5 babies. They all died because someone came and hacked it into bits with a rudimentary hatchet made out of rocks and sticks. That's just not gonna, who loves you, right? So I think what they're doing is they're turning our kids into that kind of caveman mentality.
Nihilism.
It is.
That's what I've told my son when I've talked to him about it, or the students that I have, and I talk to them about it, and I say, well, if they wanted to offer us something better, that would make sense. But they're
Correct.
offering us, you have to acknowledge that someone's a fish. You have to acknowledge just all sorts of insanity. And
it doesn't really make sense.
Nothing. Like there's all of these ideas that
you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. And so when we think about ethnic studies, just remember this, because we need to wrap up, but just remember this. They will not present the whole truth to you.
No.
You can find it. It's out there. You have to dig in and, you can come to channels like mine or channels like Deb's, but they're not going to present the whole truth to you, because they know that it is a bad offer. And it's really about control. And your children, my whole reason, because yes, I'm a person of faith too. We have 3 different faiths on this panel right now. But my whole reason is that they want to strip and remove what's called the 4 olds. Old traditions, old values, old customs, old religions. They want to remove all of those things and replace them with something that is just unpalatable. So
it's very dangerous, and
it's global.
Yeah.
And it's global. It's everywhere. But if you want to know where it ends, take a look at a place like Israel right now.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right.
What they've done. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Deb. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I don't know if I helped anyone understand what it is, but I mean, suffice to say, it is poison, and your tax dollars should not be used on it, and you should get your kids away from it as best you can, because there's nothing good about it.
Where do you live?
I live in North Carolina. So here we don't have specifically ethnic studies, but we do have sort of an African-American studies curriculum, which is pretty much, it's similar. It's just emphasis on Black history. And it's still not as pronounced as some other states have. Our bigger problem in North Carolina right now is the gender studies stuff. It's huge here.
Oh, yeah.
And from preschool on,
Mhm.
and lots of money, and BLM. Those two things in our schools are really big.
Yeah, my friend lives in North Carolina. She's telling me what it's doing to her kids.
It's bad. My kids aren't my daughter's homeschooled now.
Mm.
So because no, I'm not taking my chance. And the thing is she doesn't buy in any of this junk, but I don't want her wasting her time sitting there being
Yeah.
berated and treated like garbage.
Yeah.
Here it's about 10 minutes of instruction and 50 minutes of social interaction at school for each
Yeah.
class. So
Yeah.
dumbing down our kids it's a whole nother conversation. But I really, really appreciate both of you joining on. Brooke, did you have anything else you were thinking?
No,
Any last
thank
thoughts?
you. It was
Okay.
a pleasure to listen to you, Deb. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I appreciate it.